Hi everyone, I'm Dan Mustard, the Executive Director of Millrace Center in Columbus, Indiana. And today I'm joined by Jay Phelps, who is the County Clerk for Bartholomew County. And we're going to be talking about voting because that is really kind of a hot button topic right now, especially with COVID-19 and a lot of folks who are unsure about whether they will be able to get out and vote. So we thought it would be a great idea to have Jay come in. And questions that we're going to be asked today were submitted by Bartholomew County Indivisible. They requested that some of their members and people in the community submit questions that they would have for Jay. And so that forms the basis of what we're going to be talking about today. And so welcome, Jay. Thank you for coming in, spending some time with us.
Absolutely.
Let's just jump right into especially absentee and mail-in voting, because that really seems to be the hot topic. And let's start off by just saying, how are signatures verified? And if there's a minor difference in a name, is that going to make a difference?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dan, for being the interviewee and just for Bartholomew County Indivisible allowing a platform for voters to stay educated and informed. You know, it's so important in the next few months that we get our message out so voters know exactly all their avenues and opportunities to be able to vote. And so, great question. You know, in the primary, we had over 8,300 absentee by mail ballots. We're projecting somewhere in the range of 13,000 to 15,000 absentee ballots by mail being cast in the presidential election, and a lot of that is due to COVID-19. And so, record-setting amount. And so it's definitely changed our process, but it's been a good process. And so to answer your question, you know, if someone wants to vote by mail, the first step they need to do in Indiana is they need to request an absentee application. And they can call, they can go to indianavoters.com. Then that process is done electronically through our statewide voter registration system. And then we will process that. So the voter will basically, you know, select a reason why they're voting by mail, sign it, send that to us, and then we will send them a ballot. So ballots will go out the week of September the 14th. The ballot's still being finalized on the state and local level. So we got to, you know, proof and make sure all the offices are there and everyone's name spelled correctly and those type of things. But then the ballots will go out. So what will happen then is when we get the ballot back is we will do a signature verification from the application to the ballot itself, making sure there's no you know, real differences. And if we start seeing, you know, similarities, like the signature starts looking the same on several ballots, then we'll give, you know, those folks a call and just say, hey, we want to make sure that you know, submit this ballot on this date and clarify any issues we have. Thankfully, I don't know of any voter fraud in Bartholomew County that's ever taken place. At least in the 10 years I've been in the office, it hasn't, and that's just good, you know, a good security process and fail-safe procedures to make sure that you know, we have checks and balances, such as a Democrat and Republican checking every single ballot that comes across our office. And so that they will check the signature. And then in order for the ballot to get issued to send out to the voter, an absentee board, which is consisted of a Democrat and Republican member, will put their signatures on each ballot, and then they will include instructions. So there's instructions on how to vote that ballot. Of course, you know, it kind of reminds me of my high school days. It's a Scantron type of bubble card that you cast your ballot on. So you'll have a piece of paper with the candidates and offices, and then you will bubble in that number that you want to vote for, and then you'll submit that back in the envelope. And one of the most important things you can do is sign the front of that envelope, because we cannot accept it if there is not a signature. And there is a process. It's called an ABS-5 form that we would have you sign. However, we'd have to resubmit the entire process again and have you issue a new ballot. So with the post office, hopefully we won't have any issues. We're going to obviously stay in close contact with them, but we don't want to take any chance of any ballots being delayed. So just remember to sign that front. So minor variations in names, you know, if you're Roberts and you know, you can sign Bobby. That's not a problem. Just whatever mimics what is in our statewide voter registration system to be able to match up with your absentee ballot application and your absentee ballot itself.
Okay, a lot of people use the term mail-in voting interchangeably with absentee voting. Mm-hmm. Is there a distinction? What are the differences?
Yeah, there is, and that's what's been extremely confusing. It started back in April with some misinformation put out by some federal officials, and the difference between strictly 100% mail voting and absentee by mail. So one of the main differences, for example, in Oregon and Hawaii and in Washington State, they run their elections 100% by mail. So if you're a registered voter in those states, you get a ballot sent to you, no questions asked. You don't have to call. A ballot gets sent to every single registered voter on record, and then they vote that ballot and send it back. In Indiana, you have to, again, call. We send you the application, or you can go online, and then we send you the ballot itself. So you do have to request it. It is before Election Day, so it's considered an absentee ballot, right? So any vote that's cast before Election Day is considered an absentee ballot. And then, of course, we have in-person voting still in Indiana, absentee, in-person, and Election Day voting. So there is a major difference. The other process in those other states that I was referring to, they have more of a checks and balance system through the United States Postal Service to validate when those ballots are coming back to them. And so ours, again, is strictly absentee ballot. We still allow in-person voting, and so that would be the major distinction.
Okay. If you go to the Indiana.gov website and look at voter information, they give 11 reasons why a person would qualify for absentee. There has been some discussion about having no excuse voting.
Mm-hmm.
Just within the last week or two, there was a federal ruling, a federal judge ruled on that. Can you give any updates about what the finding was there and how that impacts Indiana?
Sure. So as of right now, there still is, you still have to have an excuse to vote by mail in Indiana. In the primary, that was temporarily where you didn't have to have an excuse, which was very helpful. We've had folks call still today saying, well, I don't want to vote because of COVID. What do I select? And my answer is select the best option that fits your needs. It's just that plain and simple, because we want people to feel safe and we want people to vote. As far as the state of Indiana is concerned, the governor has made it clear that he does not support limiting those excuses for the presidential election. And so that means the Election Commission probably won't change that ruling either. However, if there would, I know there's still other pending lawsuits that are out there. If that would happen to change through the court process, then that's probably the only way I see it changing for the presidential election to be able to put those excuses on hold. So if a voter has questions about which one they should select, my biggest response to them would be just vote the one that you feel like would fit your needs the best, because again, COVID isn't listed as an excuse. I think we're one of 7 states where COVID isn't listed as an excuse, and so we want people to be safe and still be able to vote by mail. And so again, I don't think anyone's going to try to come after anybody for picking an excuse that may or may not fit their situation. I think we want people to be able to vote legally and lawfully, but at the same time stay safe as well, and I think you can do both.
Okay. With early voting, and especially in person, what would be, I know that there's not going to be an exact answer, what would be probably the safest time if you track that? When are the fewest people normally at the voting sites themselves when you do early voting? Is there a particular time of day when people who are worried about possibly being around a crowd
Sure.
would be a little bit safer?
No, that's a great question, and just so I'm very clear, absentee in-person voting will begin on October the 6th this year. It will be at the Fair Oaks Mall, and so before we panic, there is a COVID testing site at another part of the mall. It's in the JCPenney side. It used to be JCPenney. We're going to be in Carson's. It is a completely different ventilation system. You can't get access to the other parts of the building. We're going to have signage not only on the building itself that faces 25th, but on the electronic sign. And so please don't worry. We kind of had already made that decision that we were going to vote there. And then, of course, the state asked if they could be a testing site. So I know folks were like, well, what are you doing? Why are you making that call? And so I want people to be as comfortable and be relieved that you will know which one is a testing site and which one is for voting. But the earlier the better. So on October the 6th, that's a Tuesday. That's a day after the voter registration deadline. I would urge folks to vote that week. As we continue to get closer to Election Day, you're going to probably see more lines. And one of the main reasons why we are going to be at the old Carson's building there in the Fair Oaks Mall is because we can have social distance, we can have plenty of voting machines and keep folks spread out. We will, of course, have sanitizers and folks, wiping down the machines, the equipment, the tables, the doors, and that's solely their responsibility, right? So then the other poll workers can, of course, conduct the election. And so, again, we want people to feel as comfortable as possible. One other question that is a little murky, but we do have a mask mandate and in public places and when you're out and about. And so there is some confusion about do I have to wear my mask at a polling location? And the technical answer is, well, not necessarily. However, I think it's good practice that everyone wears a mask, and I think that'll make the voters at large feel safer. And folks with that want to vote by mail that may have some pre-existing health conditions, I think it's just again taking care of our neighbors and our community by wearing a mask. So again, I think for the entire 28 days, the Carson's building really was the most safest place that we could be. We really wanted to be at Donner because folks are familiar with Donner. However, they had a lot of different events that were still scheduled to go on as planned, and they would have been moving us rooms. And so we wanted to stay consistent. We wanted a high visibility area, a place that had ADA and accessibility and parking and things of that nature. So that is why we're voting at Carson's building, and we really hope that if you don't want to vote by mail, that's probably your best option to avoid some lines on election day.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for that. That's kind of an overview of some of the issues. Let's dig a little bit deeper now into absentee and mail-in voting with some specific questions. You mentioned kind of the checks and balances. Can you go into just a little bit more detail? What are the checks and balances that are in place that will protect votes and ensure that every vote is counted?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could say in the last 10 years in Bartholomew County, if you wanted to vote, we made sure that happened. And we've had situations where, a bubble card, it was, they got wet, for example, it rained through the mail that day, or a voter didn't mark properly. So we obviously have the election board on staff. I'm a part of that board as well. And so we make a decision if we understand what the voter intent was. We just get a remake bubble card. We make the selection and we run it through the vote counting system to be sure that every vote does count. And so again, I'm really big on voter intent. Even when our voting machines, for example, when someone votes, it's kind of a fail safe, right? So you hit a confirm vote button, and then you have to hit another button that confirms your vote. Sometimes folks think, they think they're done and they walk away. Well, I've made sure that as long as there's a poll worker from each party present, they can cast that ballot for that voter because their intent was to vote and they just missed that last step. And it's the same thing with voting by mail. We want to be sure that we understand which candidates they were trying to vote for. They might have just picked a wrong number, or it wouldn't read properly due to, let's say it was, it got scrunched through the mail, or, the post office just didn't handle it carefully, that kind of thing. So that is what we do as a board to make sure every vote does count. And we did have some of those in the primary. Obviously, with 8,300 ballots, there were some that just wouldn't read, and so we again had the remake cards. We brought the board over. You understand what the voter intent was? Go ahead and mark the card with what we think the voter intent was, and we count that. And so that is where, again, I want to be sure that every vote does count in Bartholomew County.
Okay. So one of the questions that was submitted actually asks specifically about votes that might be rejected. So how many absentee votes were rejected in spring, and what were the reasons for
Sure.
this?
The vast majority of ballots that were rejected in the spring was just due that they weren't in our office by the noon deadline on election day. And so I think there were around 36 of those, which really is not a bad number at all when you take in the fact that we had over 8,300 ballots cast by mail. Now, obviously, I'd love that number to be zero, but again, that's where our office is important. That's where it's important for you folks to get the message out to voters. The deadlines, when you can vote, how you can vote, because we want those ballots to be in on a timely manner and to be able to count them. And I can just say too, we were staking out at the post office, some of us, around that noon deadline, to make sure that there was not a single ballot left behind in that facility at noon, so that way they can be counted and processed in a timely manner.
Okay. So if there were some possible delays at the post office, is there a postmark deadline where they will still be counted? And basically, how soon should a person vote? I mean, what, in your experience, what would be maybe the last day that someone would try to put something through the actual postal service?
That's a great question, and I know the Postmaster General on the state level has told the Indiana Election Division that you really need to have your absentee applications to your local election office by October 19th, and that way we have over nearly 2 weeks to be able to have that turnaround time so we can receive it. It's a receive deadline. It's not a postmark deadline, unfortunately, with the way ballots are handled. So again, we have to have that ballot in our office by noon. But the deadline to request an absentee application is October 22nd. However, the state is guiding our local offices to even have it in a few days before that, just because we don't know what we're going to be up against with any delays with the post office.
Okay. Will there be a way to track if a mail-in ballot has been accepted and recorded on or before Election Day?
Yeah, absolutely. So IndianaVoters.com or .in.gov, you can get to it either way. Is just a great one-stop shop. You can check your voter registration, you can check your polling locations, you can see who's on your ballot, and then you can also track your absentee ballot. So whenever we receive our ballot in our office, the ballot on the website will be marked as received. And so that just basically tells you that the election board and the absentee board, we have the ballot. It's been locked away and stored for Election Day to be counted. So I would highly recommend the voters use IndianaVoters.com. It's just a great one-stop shop.
Okay. So what happens if a person does an absentee vote and they're really close to the deadline, they're not sure that it's actually going to make it there, and then they go and vote in person? Mm-hmm. What happens to that at that point?
Sure. So if the voter has been sent a ballot, they can go to the polls and vote. They just have to surrender that ballot to the poll workers. There is a form they'll have to sign, and then they're free to go ahead and vote on the machine. Now, if they only filled out an application and they never sent it back in, that's okay. They don't have to do anything on there, and they can go vote in person. It's just when that ballot has been mailed to them, they do have to actually have it in their possession and hand it in to the poll workers and sign a form. And I will say too, if a voter's up against the deadline and let's say the post office took a while, that voter can always bring their ballot in person to the courthouse before Election Day at noon.
Okay. So you just touched on this. If people are worried about the mail service maybe not delivering their completed ballot on time, what are some of those other options? Will there be a drop box? Where is that drop box? Mm-hmm. And if the clerk's office is closed, can the ballot be left somewhere securely?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we received a lot of those questions, unfortunately, and I checked with the election attorneys at the state. Unfortunately, we can't have drop boxes in Indiana because we're not a vote-by-mail state, and there's a form called an ABS 19 form, and it's just basically saying that if you're dropping, let's say your mom or your dad or your kids' ballot off, we have to have you sign that form in person. You can drop your own ballot off, that's fine, or a spouse, but if you drop anyone else in your immediate family, there does have to be an ABS 19 form filled out, and so that's why a drop box is not permissible. But I can tell you again, if we're open from 8 to 5, and of course then we're always working over as well. So if you give us a call, we'll do our very best to receive that ballot, and especially on Election Day, if you have it in your possession, just bring it into the courthouse. We'll be there the entire day. Hopefully not 2 days or 3 days past the election, but we'll definitely be sure it gets counted if it's there by noon on Election Day.
Okay, so just to clarify then, if your grandparents fill out an absentee ballot, a grandchild or someone else can deliver that, but then they have to fill out a specific form.
There's a form they'd have to sign.
Okay.
Yes.
But then they can deliver that on behalf of someone else.
And again, that's why we can't have drop boxes, because there's that form in place.
Yeah. Okay. Discuss the process for resolving issues encountered during absentee voting, such as if a ballot is requested but never received, if a ballot gets rendered unusable. I think you mentioned in the past that something had water been spilled on it or something like that. So what is that process then for resolving those kind of issues?
Sure. So we would just ask the voters, remain vigilant during this election. So if you send your application in and it's been a week, when I say a week, 5 business days, we want you to call us if you haven't received that ballot yet. Because there's probably a delay with the post office, and so if that's the case, depending on the turnaround we have, we would try to have you. We could email you an ABS 5 form. You'd spoil your ballot, and we'll put another one in the mail that day. If that's not an option, then again we would have to look at other options, such as maybe a travel board. If you're a confined voter, we could always send a travel board, or you would have to vote in person. So it really depends on what we're up against with the deadline. But any defective, ballot, or if, let's say one gets chewed up, that's where the election board would definitely take a look at that, as long as it's in our possession, and try to do a remake card to be sure that vote gets counted.
Okay. You mentioned the travel board, and could you talk just a little bit about what that is, how a person would request service from the travel board?
Yeah, absolutely. So the travel board for years has, they go to all of our assisted living facilities, all of our nursing homes, and they can even do a private residence as well if someone's confined, had surgery. If they are able to meet the requirements to vote by travel board, and it can even be for caregivers that are caring for confined, then we would send the board out to that residence or to that facility, and they would be able to vote that person. It would be a Democrat and Republican member of the travel board, and so they would be able to take care of them, and they wouldn't have to leave their home. Now, with COVID, that's a little bit different, and I can tell you that the Clerks Association, we're waiting on maybe some changes with that, because as you know, nursing homes and assisted living facilities are they're very high on the spectrum with the possibility of getting COVID. So, in the primary, we were allowed to make phone calls to the voter with both travel board members present, and vote. Again, you're giving up a little bit of secrecy there, but it all depends on your comfort level. If not, we could always go to the home and vote outside of a window as long as we knew the selection. So the travel board, they do go above and beyond again to make sure that whoever wants to vote is able to vote. And so they would just need to give us a call, our office, 812-379-1604, and just say, hey, I have a family member that would like to vote by travel board, and we'll get the application filled out and get them scheduled, and have the board, make sure they get taken care of.
Okay. And we'll make sure that phone number is linked at the very end of this video. We'll have a slide that will have the link for indiana.gov and some of the specific guidelines for voting. Also for the Bartholomew County Clerk's Office. So we'll make sure that information is posted as well. Let's shift gears just a little bit. We've kind of talked about mail-in voting and absentee votes, the travel board. Let's talk a little bit more now about voting in person. Mm-hmm. What is a provisional ballot, and when can that be used?
Sure. So a provisional ballot it's a fail-safe. So let's say you come to the polls and you forgot your photo ID, and you left it at home, you're busy, and you don't have, let's say it's 10 till 6, and you don't have time to run back home. The poll workers can give you a provisional ballot. There's a form that you'll fill out, and then you would vote basically a paper ballot and with your listing on your precinct. And then you have 10 days after the election, because the election is not certified until 10 days after, to bring that ballot back, your ID back into the office within that 10 days, the elections office, and then we would count that vote. The same could be true, a lot of times if there's, if a voter swears that they're registered in Bartholomew County and we don't have them on record, let's say the poll worker calls us and we look them up and we can't find them, there could be a chance that we maybe made a mistake on our end. Let's say it's one of those addresses that's on the Brown County line, and it somehow got in Brown County and it should have been Bartholomew. We issue what's called a certificate of error. And that basically just says, yeah, that was a staff member's issue. They should have been registered, and we will tell the poll worker basically, hey, here's what precinct they should be in, and let them vote on the machine. So there's paperwork to do that as well. So again, a provisional ballot is just there, so the voter just isn't out of luck. They do have a chance to be able to cast that ballot and then to produce whatever identification they needed or whatever the issue was afterwards. And the same could be said. Let's say they say they were registered. We didn't have anything on our end, but they had an acknowledgement card that was sent to them. Hey, I can prove that I was registered, right? They can also bring that back within 10 days. So again, it's just another fail-safe to where we're just not turning voters away blindly.
Okay, very good. Can someone vote in person without a picture ID?
Not to my knowledge, they can't. To vote in person in Indiana, you have to have a driver's license, a passport that has a photo on it, a college ID that most of them have photo IDs on it, a military ID. So those really are the type of identifications that are required, and again, most of those have photo IDs, and so that is kind of the reason behind it. It's so that the poll worker can verify, oh yes, Dan is in front of me, and so I prove that that's him by the picture, and so that just kind of a clarification. Your driver's license does not have to be updated with where you're registered at. It's more for the security purpose of that photo.
Okay. How can a person verify that they are actually registered to vote?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can, a couple different ways. IndianaVoters.com, they can go on there and it'll ask them to fill out their name, address, date of birth, and then if they're in our system, it will pick them up. If not, they can give us a call, 812-379-1604, and we will look them up as well. Again, the voter registration deadline is October the 5th, and one of the easiest ways, if you have an Indiana driver's license, doesn't have to be updated, but as long as it's an Indiana driver's license, they can register to vote on that website. site within minutes, and it's just a very easy process.
Okay. And so would that also be the same way if someone found out that their status wasn't active? Is that the same process then?
Yeah, so in Indiana, we have active and inactive voters. They're both eligible to vote at any point in time. Inactive just means that you're beginning the process of being put on to basically being a canceled voter at some point if you don't vote in 2 federal general elections. So that means that we sent you a mailer and it came back, and we tried another correspondence and it came back. We start you on the inactive process, and then after 2 federal general elections, if you don't vote, you become canceled. I know on the state level, the Secretary of State's office does a voter list maintenance project. It's usually every other year during the summer, and so they'll mail out something to all registered voters, and the ones that come back begin that process. And so again, if you see yourself inactive, that's no reason to panic. Just vote. That way, it resets the process, and you're good to go for several years. But we also want to be sure we have clean voter rolls, and that you're updating your registration, because it matters by where you live and the precinct ballot that you get, even though we're vote centers and who will be on your ballot. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay. And if there's no record of in someone's registration, what is the process then?
Sure. So we would obviously, if there's no record, we would just ask them that they would update, immediately and either do a new voter registration or update their voter registration. And again, they can do that through indianavoters.com or give us a call, and we can mail them out a blank form.
Okay. And what if the ID card that's stored in the system doesn't match a person's license or their ID card, the address or the name, something like that?
Yeah, so when we process new registrations or updated registrations in the system, there'll be times where someone will put their last 4, because you could do your driver's license number, the last 4 of your social. Sometimes they'll say no match found when they try to pair it with the Social Security Administration. And so a lot of times it's just a wrong number that someone written down. So we do a correspondence saying, hey, can we have your accurate number? Is this correct? Other times, with the same thing with the driver's license number. So we do reach out to the voter. We just don't blindly reject it, and that's the case closed. We reach out to them and be sure we have all the right information, or we'll give them a call. So that's really not an issue that we have, because we stay on top of it and we have that dialogue back and forth with the voter. But yeah, if something came along and we said no, driver's license can't be found or social can't be found, we will follow up with that voter to be sure we get the right information before the deadline.
Okay, very good. So is there any other information that you'd like to share with voters before we close out today?
Yeah. No, obviously vote, right? That's it's so important. It's the way that all of us have a voice, and we all have the same equal voice when we vote. And there's several opportunities, and I understand that the numbers are still high with COVID-19, and we want folks to feel as comfortable as possible with voting. So if you would like to vote by mail, just remember the application deadline is October the 22nd. However, we would ask that you get that in before that. You can give us a call, or you can go to indianavoters.com and fill one out electronically. And then the ballots themselves are due back November the 3rd. That's election day at noon in our possession. So you can send them through the mail, or you can turn them in at the courthouse in person. But again, we want to be sure that you have the opportunity to vote. And then October the 6th at the Old Carson's building on the 25th Street side of Fair Oaks Mall, 8 to 5 each day, and then 2 Saturdays, October the 24th and October 31st, Halloween there, from 8 to 5, we'll have voting as well. And then we'll have 12 Election Day locations, 6 in the city, 6 in the county on Election Day. So just be sure that you check your registration, be sure you're registered, and then be sure you vote, because a lot of folks, they'll register and not show up. So we want to see high participation, and we want to see folks involved, and that just says a lot about our community, I think, when we see a high turnout. So we had a record-breaking turnout in the 2016 presidential, and I'd love to see another one in the 2020.
Very good. Well, thank you. I know that there's currently a lot of political rancor, but I think that almost everyone in Bartholomew County agrees that you've done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all happy with the work that you do.
It says a lot about the staff, the board members from each party, and then the poll workers, of course, right? It's a long day. It's a 13, 14-hour day of their time, and we certainly appreciate all the efforts that go into making the election a success and allow people to be able to have their rights as citizens exercised.
Well, thank you. Well, thanks to the folks from Bartholomew County Indivisible also for supplying many of the questions that we had today. Thank you, Jay, for your time and for sharing this really, really valuable information.
Yep, appreciate
and again, we will post all the links at the end of this video, phone numbers and the websites where people can get more information about voting in Bartholomew County. So stay safe, everyone, and thank you.
Thanks.